let me begin on that note, because I know who you are and I know who I am,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of these folks that are joining this conversation. We are tired from just all of the shit, man. There's just
Yeah.
so much to think about and process, and you still have to
Yeah.
go to work, and you have to take care of your kids and your partners and neighbors, and you still have to take the trash out. It's still.
Yeah.
I'd love
Yeah.
to know how do you, or did you, since most of the holidays have come and gone, how did you balance the holidays, all the love, joy, interconnectedness, togetherness that I hope and assume that you experienced, with what's happening uh, in the world, with what's happening very near and dear to our heart? Uh, how do you stay in it? How do you show up for the people that you love,
Yeah.
when I know that, at least for me,
Yeah.
my brain, my heart, it's with my Palestinian siblings, it's with my Congolese siblings, it's with my
Yeah.
Sudanese siblings. Like, I just can't ever stop thinking about it. So how do you do that?
Um, my immediate response was going to be radical honesty,
Mm,
but I mean, even this notion of like honesty being radical to me takes away from, I guess, the energy of it all, because it's just me being very transparent with where I am.
yeah,
Like I had a conversation with my brother via text, and I was just like, he was asking me what to get the girls, and I was like, nothing.
yeah,
And and that started a conversation around uh, the genocide. It started a conversation around consumerism and discomfort. And it's a thing that I've been telling folks. It's like, we need to learn how to be okay with the uncomfortable. What we're seeing a lot now is folks just uncomfortable and not knowing how to sit with that, because a majority of us don't have access to a
yeah,
practice, or we have a practice and we're misusing it, or we're using it only for special occasions, or we're using it when we're actually doing yoga or meditating, but not bringing it into real world interactions. And so, we took the girls out of school for the first general strike.
wow,
And, it was, and I had to have a conversation with my 8-year-old about genocide, and, having to stumble my way through that conversation while trying to be as completely honest with her and delicate with her, and also trying to ground her in over 100 some odd years of conflict and genocide and apartheid and ethnic cleansing, right? Like, with an 8-year-old. But, like, I didn't grow up in a political household, and not because my mom didn't want to talk about politics, but it just wasn't a thing that was really part of our day to day. I had to learn how to be political. And so for me, what's been helping me, I guess, find the balance is the times when it's not balanced. The days where
yeah,
everything that I'm talking about is about Palestine, it's about Gaza, it's all these things, right, connected. And, when people ask me how I'm doing, I'm like, I don't, I don't, and I've never been the one, well, not never, but as of late, as I've gotten older, I don't really mince words when it comes to that. And so for
yeah.
me, it's just being about, and if it makes other people uncomfortable, I can't, that's not really my cross to bear at this point, but that, the honesty has been a big part of that. And like, there's joy in between that. And so not pushing that away either. A Buddhist practice has, I think, allowed me the opportunity to sit with all the things, even when the joy feels uncomfortable. It's like, it's here. If it's present, that means it's here. That means I need to acknowledge it. If the tears are here, I need to acknowledge it. I don't turn away from any of it at this point.
That's really beautiful, because especially during the last 3 months. I mean, obviously, you and I, at our age, we've seen lots of conflicts, lots of shit
Yeah,
happen.
for sure.
But this one feels very much like 2020, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. Like, it's in our faces, right? Like, the world is changing before our very eyes, right?
Yeah,
And so I have had to get very comfortable with doing a shit job at parenting, being a partner. Like, I have
yeah,
apologized so infinite a number of times the last few months, as I have gotten angry at them, and it's
yeah,
not their fault.
yeah,
Like, it's what I've been thinking about and working on all day,
yeah,
right? And then the other hard part is, like, yeah, when I do feel joy, when I get a good cigar out, or when I
yeah,
get a joint, when I go for a walk in
yeah,
Manhattan where I live,
yeah,
I like not feeling bad for feeling amazing for a few minutes, for
yeah.
feeling really like joy.
Absolutely.
That's just
Yeah,
a really hard balance to keep. Oh, what happened? Joél left. 1 second, folks. He's coming back. Let's see if I can invite Joél back. Hang in there. There we go. Are you back?
Yeah. I lost you by
No
accident, man.
worries. No.
But I was able to hear everything you were saying.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, and bro, that's the thing, man. It's like I think part of what I've had to frame for myself again. It's also to what I'm hearing when I'm hearing you talk. It's about allowing for grace. You know, I was talking with a friend of mine, a Jewish friend of mine, who's really going through it, and really re-examining a lot of her relationships, her friendships, and you know, I shared a video about this earlier today, and it's like I don't know what it looks like to have to grow up where I've been indoctrinated to believe a certain thing, you know, and removing myself from that, and like the trauma that involves of like lost friendships, lost family members. I don't have that kind of community around me. I've just never been a part of something like that, and so for me, it's like when I hear you talk about the forgiveness, it's really having to offer ourselves grace, because this is a moment unlike any other. I think even when we think about 2020 and George Floyd, I think the connection to capitalism is always central when we're looking at some sort of like revolutionary practice that's happening in real time. But we we caught a, like George Floyd was one person, you know, and we saw the after video. We're seeing in real time Basan and Mumtaz like capturing dead bodies of humans. And I was having again a conversation I was having earlier today, because again I'm talking about it all the time.
Yep.
And I think we should be talking about it all the time. If you know, I use the reference of like if I'm a sports fan, right, and I have a fantasy league, 9 out of 10 times, even before Sunday, on Wednesday, there's Thursday night football, there's Monday night football, I'm talking about the game.
Yeah.
Like, because that's where my energy is going. My energy right now is with with the Palestinian people. It's with all forms of revolutionary practice and what is happening in the world and the suffering. But all that to say, it's like having to offer myself grace and others grace as well, because we're all going through this together in this kind of hodgepodge. We've never actually been here before. There's nothing that has happened prior to this that offers us the context in order to deal with the death we're seeing. Even when I think of Vietnam, we were seeing it through the lens of soldiers, right? We're seeing it through the lens of not the Viet Cong. We're seeing it through U.S. soldiers, and like we're seeing some civilians. But again, it's after footage and it's media-led footage. This is like real shit happening in real time. There is no practice for that. You know, we're learning this as we go.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is not even day by day, hour by hour,
Literally.
minute by minute.
Literally.
You talked a minute ago. You mentioned revolution, and you recently shared on your Instagram that the only love I'm worried about is the kind of love that can start a revolution.
Yeah.
And so what I want to ask you about is when those two words, let's separate them for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Love. Now, obviously, as we grow up and learn more about life, we tend to think about love less. I'm going to describe it, but still, you know, we think about love. It's mushy.
Yeah.
It's, you know, feel good. It's hugs and kisses and dates and romance, right? We think of that love, right? Or love for neighbor, or love for whatever.
Absolutely.
And then is literally like the definition is a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system.
Mm-hmm.
So those words shouldn't go together, Joél. They shouldn't go together, and yet they do. I believe they do.
Absolutely.
You put that idea out there. Tell me, what does revolutionary love look like right now, December 2023, about to close out a pretty fucked up year, going to the next one? What does that look like?
Yeah. You know, I would strongly suggest us using Adrienne Marie Brown, Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, you know, June Jordan as guides in that work. I think Mark Lamont Hill is a guide in that work. Because if I'm looking at this solely through the lens of romance, I'm completely missing the point. And I think what Western media has allowed that to do so. And when I say media, I also mean entertainment as well. Like you know, the fantasies of like the sleepless Seattles of the world and like the fairy tales surrounding what love can be. And that's a beautiful thing and a beautiful concept. But when I think about the work that Bell Hooks has essentially called together for us, so much of that is centering love as a practice. You know, when I think of love, I think of the Black Panther Party. You know, when I think, because I think of love of community. Like, you know, if we're thinking about not just the 10-point program, but the free breakfast program and how that is the foundation for the welfare system we look at today, that is a loving practice. That is the most loving thing I think I have ever seen an organization do for people. And it came and it sprang from a love of people, right? And a love of community, so much so that I'm willing to do anything I humanly possibly can in order to change the foundational systems that are essentially holding us hostage. I see Bosco. What up, homie? And this notion of love being radical and love being revolutionary is so incredibly important for me, for my work, because it allows me to show up for practice with empathy, with compassion, with forgiveness, and also with accountability, you know, and with boundaries. Like, you know, this notion that, you know, I'll block, mute, delete anyone who is showing up in a space that is not here for healthy dialogue around what abolition looks like, around what liberation looks like, you know, all these things. And like, love is my practice. Love is my religion. Like I've adopted as a principle for how I try to show up in the world. And so that practice allows me to show up for my partner in the same ways that I'm going to show up for this community member who's suffering, who needs a loaf of bread, who needs shelter, who needs guidance, who needs someone to help them participate in moving forward in this very stagnant conversation we keep having about the political system. Love is political. Love has always been political. You know, whether you're a polyamorous, whether you're a relationship anarchist, like the ideas of how do we revamp and reimagine a system, for me, all starts with love. Because if I can't show up with love in conflict, in conversation, then all I'm going to continue to do, and it's something I try to remind people often, is we're just going to keep replacing oppressive systems with other oppressive systems, because we haven't done the healing work to love ourselves first enough to be able to remove ourselves and ego from this conversation about what revolution and a radical nature looks like for all of us, you know?
I love you,
Yeah, I
brother.
love you
Your
too, man.
your heart, like everything you're saying, like everything you're saying, is what I think about all day long, and
I
what
know.
I'm trying to pass along to my kids and my neighbors and my
Right.
friends and my relatives and
Yeah.
all that. So I'm really appreciative of your work. Another thing you said, and I'm going to reference a few, uh, you know, Instagram posts
Cool.
and things that you shared,
Yeah, bro.
uh, because you have something that I don't have, and I'm very quick to be able to say like what I'm good at and what I'm not so great
You're good
at,
at, I
right?
mean, you are good at a
Well,
lot of things, bro.
I
Don't
appreciate
worry.
that. But you're able to take these, and we talked about this a little bit in the podcast we did a couple years ago on Let's Give a Damn, but you're able to take these pretty complex ideas and like, put them in such, such short, succinct, powerful ways. Another one that you just shared recently was, let's stop selling each other a fairy tale. There is no,
That was that was like 10 minutes ago,
yeah,
bro.
I was literally getting ready for this conversation, and I was like, why does he keep putting these bangers out? But I love this one because, again, I think it's very applicable right now with
Yeah.
Gaza, with what's happening. Like, not right now, theoretically. At this moment, there are bombs going. There are more kids being left without parents. There are more people being told, "Hey, move here," and then when they get there, they're bombed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a disaster. So let's stop selling each other a fairy tale. There's no, I'm going to go in and change the system. Let's use our imaginations. Let's dismantle it. So in this moment, I too am an abolitionist. I have been told by very smart, wise people that I love, respect, that I think are great activists and great change makers and great damn givers. But they still seem to think that in these systems of capitalism, or in these systems of the police, or in these systems of the prison industrial complex, or in these systems of whatever, war, that we can redeem this, right? The heart, how this began, there were good motivations. We're trying to protect this, that, and the other. So let's try to redeem it. Let's not blow it the fuck up. And I'm like, nah, like
Yeah.
some things maybe, but these big systems that we've seen over years and decades and centuries never do the right thing. We have to abolish. We have to dismantle them. So in this moment, Joel, with not just we're observing what's happening in Palestine. our government, the man that I happily voted for
Mm-hmm.
in 2020,
Yep.
is funding this thing,
Yeah.
is supporting these one of the images that I'll never get out of my head is when President Biden went to Israel and he hugged Netanyahu, and Netanyahu's head was in his, like, there's a hug and then there's a hug, and
Yeah.
Netanyahu's head was in his shoulder,
Yeah.
like Biden was consoling him.
Yeah.
And this was weeks into this genocide. So, like, we're active participants because we have to pay our taxes, or we go to, right? The whole system's set up. You don't pay your taxes, you go to prison,
Yeah.
but don't pay. But your tax money is going to be used for things that you have no control over and are evil.
Yeah.
How do we? What is the abolition dismantling movement look? How do we do that as single people living in the United States with really we don't have any lever or any button we can push to end this thing? How do we move forward as we close this year and go into the next?
Okay, so there's three parts. I'm gonna try to hopefully don't forget. But thank you for this beautiful question, this framing. One thing I think of, like, if we think about what the when the American Revolution started, and can you hear me, by the way?
I can hear you great.
Okay, perfect. Okay,
I saw that comment, but I can hear you perfectly.
just making sure. Okay, because I can hear you fine. I think when we think about the American Revolution, Americans would decide they weren't going to pay taxes. The tariffs were too high, right? Like, we think about the Boston Tea Party, the thing that I had to learn about over and over again in school, right? Motherfuckers throwing people off a boat because we're not paying these taxes. We're not doing this. And so this notion that America has been nothing but a revolutionary country, right? In the sense that it's created the foundation through the colonialization and harm and trauma and murder that is capitalized on, right? Has also forced marginalized and oppressed people to fight for the things that essentially should be rights, but have been created to seem as privileges, right, for us. And so when we're thinking about this through that lens, what I also think about too is I think about the BDS movement. I think about how essentially money is the root to all of this, right? We keep hearing the phrase, I think, of like, follow the money. When you follow who AIPAC is supporting, I think it makes it very easy to see, okay, these are the ways in which my tax dollars, outside of just funding this genocide, it's also funding the arms dealers. It's also funding folks who are supporting Israeli troops overseas, right? And it's all these things it's all these intersections, and being able to bear witness to these intersections allows us to do the work, right? And so if we're thinking about our phones, right, if we're thinking about, okay, how do I ensure that I'm not supporting the harm that is happening to the people of the Congo, then it's like, do I need the iPhone 13? Do I need the iPhone 14? Do I need a new iMac? It's these very small ways that feel small, but if a collective is moving together in this work of boycotting, right, these institutions, then I think this makes this a bigger, broader conversation. And if I'm thinking about, I think about a couple of things. One second. I think about my dear friend Zola Ellen, an abolitionist who, for me, framed up the ways we get to reimagine all of this. And I think about her often when I think about, sometimes I would get into kind of this fatalist view of, well, I don't know what we can do. And she's like, as an abolitionist, our goal is to continuously reimagine what these systems look like and what they can look like, even if we've never seen it before. But then also too, having to be honest with reality. And that's what the hard part with, like, that post you shared of mine, because on one hand, I can recognize folks wanting to show up in these spaces and go, oh, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer and I'm going to change the system. I'm going to be a judge and I'm going to change the system. And it's like if you went into a house, right, with faulty walls and lead, you can't keep the walls. You got to break the thing down and rebuild again. Like, if I'm thinking about the Constitution of America, it was written by slave owners. In what world do we possibly think that a thing that was actually not centering democracy at all, but centering capitalists and capitalist views, how is that thing going to be for the benefit of the people, right? And so it's this constant reimagining of the systems, because I would love to be able to feel comfortable voting for Biden. That would be ideal, the ideal scenario. But this notion that we're going to keep feeding into a system and hope, if we're going to ignore history and just hope that someday we're going to keep buying into this illusion of democracy that's going to come true. And it's not. And we're dependent on them to do that for us. And what we're seeing now in Gaza, what we're seeing in Palestine is like folks being like, there's a genocide happening. We don't want to participate in this. What are the ways to detach ourselves from that? And if everything is political, that means what I eat, where I drink, where I go to eat my food, where my food comes from, right? How I get to work, where I work, right? Who I work for, who is my job connected to, all these things that I know I'm thinking about every single day. And if we're not doing that in a very radical, honest, transparent way and having these conversations with each other, then we're going to stay stuck in these systems of monotony, you know? And dismantling the system means detaching ourselves from every single part of the system that is controlling the ways we get to show up in the world.
I love that, because what you're talking about is what I'm hearing is that we need to continue saying these things over and over and over again, saying that in compelling ways, in creative ways, in artistic ways, because if a lot of the people that I talk to about these dismantling abolitionist ideas, they're like, you know, it's you're never going to get that critical mass to be able to dismantle these systems. And I'm like, no shit. If with that attitude,
Yeah.
that like never going to get there. But we're seeing it right now. We are seeing decisions in the time of war change.
Yep.
Now they should happen weeks earlier, months earlier. The things should have never happened at all.
Mm-hmm.
But these protests that are happening in 120, 130, 140 countries around the world in support of our Palestinian siblings and their liberation and their freedom, it's influencing political movements all over the world. So we're seeing in real time that if you just stop thinking that it's not going to work, and if you just start actually doing it, one foot in front of the other, stop buying here, stop going there,
Yes.
stop participating in that thing, it will happen. Yes, it might take longer than we would like,
Mm-hmm.
but it can, and it will happen. These changes.
I mean, if we look at, excellent point, bro. Like if we think about the work that Grace Lee Boggs and James and James Boggs have kind of pulled together. Like what Grace Lee will say is like progress is not linear. You know, if we're looking at any of the movements, whether it's the Marxist movements, whether it's the Industrial Revolution, if we're looking at this through the lens of the Vietnam War and how the Viet Cong approached war, right, and revolution, right, it's the notion that it doesn't happen in a straight line. You know, and so much of the abolitionist work really is we need to also be centering what the future can look like and also trying to plan for it. The reason why it's so hard to imagine for so many of us is because we actually don't have community. We got a bunch of motherfuckers running around throwing parties, thinking like that's community and like that's cute. But community, again, it's if we set up a mutual aid for the folks who are struggling here, folks are going to commit to that, you know. But I think we've also adopted this very sad idea of our exceptionalism, whether we are aware of it or not, right? So even when we look at this era in time, we're like, we're going to be different. We're going to be different. And so we're hoping that this is going to change without actually doing any of the things required to change it. You know what I'm saying? Like when Frantz Fanon is talking about revolution, he's also talking about arms. You know, and some of that is also not picking up a weapon. Some of that is like the weapon of of language, right? The weaponizing the language of the people in order to change some of this stuff. And like to your point, like so much of this, Nick, is us repeating. Like I like to tell people, repetition is holy. Like you know, people, the idea of repeating things, we need to hear things over and over. Even if we're thinking of this through the lens of an algorithm, I share a message. Even with all the community I have here on Instagram, not everyone's gonna see. Not everyone who has tapped in and is following me is on this live. They might catch it three months later if they're on my page, and like that's how repetition works. You know, it's not the first effort being the last effort. And so abolition for me is also, okay, what does this look like in practice to have community? What does transformative justice look like? Meaning, how do we hold space to hold people accountable and give folks the opportunity to change, like whatever harm or trauma that has been perpetuated in said community, and then also what does the process of reintegration look like. And so much of that is having to reimagine how community actually functions, because right now it doesn't function. Like if I live in New York and I live in Bed-Stuy, I'm fortunate enough that I have community around me. It's not a gated community, right? It's not a community that's separate from each other, and so much of our community is separate from each other, and it's in a hierarchy. It's this notion of I have more than you, money, acclaim, status, whatever. And
Whatever.
community does not censor that. Real community is like we all are sharing within this pot of liberation, and so what I have, you have. You know, it's the community of our ancestors and our elders that we've lost because so much of this is being led by technology and not enough with humanity in the process.
It's incredibly powerful. Friends listening, remember these couple things from that little bit. Repetition is holy. Keep saying it. Keep saying it. Keep saying it. Keep saying it. And figure out real community. And you and I need to have more conversation about it, because that's I feel like that's my calling in life. That's clear about you. I think a lot more people, that's their calling in life, is to it's to literally create out of nothing a real, genuine community where that happens.
Yeah. And before we move on, Nick, and it's important for me to call this out. Like, while I talk about community, I need to be very mindful of the ableist way community gets to be utilized, right? And so there are folks who don't have access to community, whether because they have a visible or invisible disability, whatever the case might be. They may not be in a place where physical community is actually even safe, right? And so I think part of that is making sure that in our practice we are centering those who are the most marginalized, who are the most oppressed, and then also seeking those folks out. I don't think we as community who have privilege tend to do a good enough job of finding folks who are suffering, who also don't look like us, and inviting them to the table. And so for me, what has to become a part of my practice is like, is this practice also centering the most oppressed and most marginalized? And that's not just me as a Black man. It's trans, Black, fat women. It's non-binary folks. It's disabled folks. It's how are we creating spaces so that folks feel safe enough. And there was a young sister who called me out, and I can't remember her name, but like safer, right? Like I've been doing a lot of safe community, but what does safer community look like? Like what are the other things we need to be doing in praxis, right? To ensure that we're continuing to expound on what community gets to look like. But we have to be mindful of how we're creating community for folks who don't know what community looks like.
That's so incredibly gorgeous. I mean, I am a privileged person that gets to like rock with some really cool folks and work, right?
Same.
Really amazing folks, and not everybody has that. I too had a recent encounter where I was helping build an online community platform for a nonprofit, and I did a one-on-one Zoom call with this young queer woman in New York that has a physical disability, and she was like at tears that like creating this online community because she can't go out. She's very she's immunocompromised. She has a physical, it's like she can't go out all that often for fear of dying. So this online community is literally life-giving to her, this community that I was building. And there's so many folks out there that need for us to be creative and to be proactive, as you said, to go after them and not just wait for them to come to us.
And I mean, in like you saying that, bro, like it just, I've been doing this, and this in-person book and poll series here in Brooklyn, and I've been very like non-camera, like I don't want cameras in it because I want it to be an experience for folks, but how limiting it is to not at least record it. And like, even like, I don't want it to be a podcast. I'm not interested in it. I'm more interested in people being able to come together, but not everyone has access to that. And so I think even this conversation has me strongly considering and reconsidering how I allow the online community to participate in the conversation and hear it, and sharing that, and like I think that's a bigger conversation. It's part of like
and I the first one of those events, I think, and I thought when I was sitting there with 27, 30 other folks, I was thinking, I want the whole world to be here right now because like magical words are being spoken from you, from the cafe owners, other people in the community there. We're speaking such incredible things. So I too wrestle with that as well. A couple more things because I don't. It's late and we have a lot of things to do, and this won't be our last time to talk. But something else that you posted. Here we go again. But you posted that you're inspired by the likes of such individuals such as Dick Gregory, Harry Belafonte, Black recognized very clearly what their roles were in the movement, and without haste showed up to the movement. So I want to ask you, December 28th, 2023, with all that's come before, and as you personally are looking forward to 2024, what's your role in the movement right now, my friend?
It's giving folks language. I hear it often enough that it's very clear to me. I get at least one message a week now where it's like, thank you because you've inspired me to use my voice and use my platform. And to me, that is the thing. It's, being the spark. I think about Baldwin a lot. It's not like Baldwin was a formal member of the NAACP. You know, Baldwin was an intellectual who also created art that forced us to think about our present state of being and how can we dismantle those ways in order to find some level of liberation for Black people globally, and in documenting that and documenting his experiences. When I think of Toni Morrison, when I think of Amiri Baraka, when I think of Nikki Giovanni, these are the poets who influenced me, who inspired me to write. Like, I'm not the person I am without them kind of paving a way for me. And so when I think about the likes of Dick Gregory pivoted his platform immediately once he realized, oh wait, there's something bigger than comedy happening here. Harry Belafonte, the same. It's like Harry could have kept making the same music. Paul Robeson could have kept performing on stages, but he saw that communism at that time was the thing that was really allowing Black folks to show up at the table in a world, in a country that wasn't even possible. And so even when we think about McCarthyism, right? Like we're seeing it happen now. This notion of, if you're speaking out against what you're seeing as far as a genocide is concerned, the label of anti-Semite becomes also a part of the conversation, conflating the real harm and danger that our Jewish brothers and sisters and non-binary folks face every day. From right-wing fanatics and those who would want to see the ending of Jewish peoples, right? And like, that is not the work here. The work is, how do we all get free? And so for me, it's giving folks the language, educating myself, and then also making sure while I'm doing that, like, I'm sharing information I'm getting in real time. So everything I'm doing is very much a part of the learned experience. So when I share a reel and the cover image is an image of a Wikipedia page that's talking about the Angola 3, or it's talking about the definition of ethnic cleansing, it's an opportunity for us to be educating each other. Because for so often, the resources and the knowledge have been co-opted, right, by the colonized. And so we're learning all this colonized information, we're ingesting it, and then we're told to believe this is the truth. And it's like, there's an opportunity for us to kind of reimagine and dismantle what all these systems look like. And so for me, it's giving folks the tools and the language so that they can go on their own journey. Like, I'm not telling you anything else, that I'm just giving you the information. Like, this is what's here. I know what they're telling you, but they're not giving you everything, because then that would require you to think. And no one
Yep.
wants a thinking populace,
Yep. Beautiful. There's 25 folks sitting in with us right now. They're popping in and out, and people watch this later on the timeline. As we close out 2023 and go into 2024, don't speak to me for 30 seconds. Speak to the people in this audience right now. What do you want them taking into 2024?
Love as a revolutionary practice to change the world. And that means questioning everything. I say it often, my favorite people are the most curious people. And it's because curious people are asking questions about every single part, every single intersection that we meet in this world. And if we're not getting curious about this world will eat us alive.
Yeah.
And like, what we're seeing are, like, after October 7th, folks were told, you don't know enough about this to speak on it. And so what people started doing was learning more. And the more folks learn, and even now I'm seeing it happen in real time, that the arguments are shifting because there's no real argument to be had anymore, because the truth is so unbelievably apparent. And so what I ask of us is not to just use love as a revolutionary practice, but to lean into radical transparency and honesty. And this notion of, what is the truth beckoning me to do? And despite of what may happen, being willing to share that truth, because there are folks who do not have that privilege. There are folks right now who are dying, right, because they don't have this privilege. There are folks' bodies under rubble because that privilege was taken away from them due to apartheid, due to ethnic cleansing. Like, we have a real opportunity here to actually destroy all these systems that are harming us. And the only way to do that is if we do that together as a community, you know?
Audience, take note that the first thing that Joél said after calling us to revolutionary love is to question everything. I love that that was the first place your mind went to. Is like, you've got to. That's how we love each other, is by looking at the systems that we've been told. This is how the world works, motherfucker. Just like take it, eat it, buy into it. Just like work your job, think about yourself, retire, and fly off into the afterlife if there is one. That's not it. Question everything. Radical transparency. I so love that.
And question me, but more importantly, question yourself. You know, like, I'm actively interrogated, and some people might think that's tiring, but for me, it's not tiring because I love myself. I love myself enough to put myself to the mirror and ask, what am I doing? How am I showing up in the world? And being open to that being challenged, because that's the only way I expand. And if I want to get free, that means I have to be willing to expand, which means I need to be willing to question everything, and also being willing to destroy anything that is getting in the way of our collective liberation. Because if you're not free, that means I'm not free. You know, that's what freedom looks like. It's freedom for all, you know, and we're not there yet, but I think we'll get there together.
We will get there, and that's a great place to wrap. My friend Howard Zinn said, "They have the guns, we have the poets, therefore we will win."
Yeah. Shout out to Howard, man. He be knowing, bro.
My revision is, "They have the guns, we have the poets, therefore we will motherfucking win."
Yeah, I love the expletive. We need that.
It's just not. There's no question.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not giving my life to this to lose here, because I really believe with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength that, like, where we're going is, as you pointed out, liberation for all. So
I'm also, too, folks, like, to Nick, to your point, Algerian Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, like, I mean, it speaks to exactly what you're talking about. Again, if we're looking at the Vietnam War, we're looking at how the Viet Cong essentially won that war. It's a war of information. It's a war of knowledge. It's a war of understanding the history and the context and the conditions in which we live in. And knowing that allows us to change that as well, you know?
Thank you so much for joining me for this short 40-minute conversation. I love you so much.
You too.
You have a book coming out too.
I do.
Nothing at Once, a Black Man's Reimagined Soundtrack for the Future.
Yeah.
You got a cover you're going to show us right now?
Yeah, man. Yeah, you know, these are just the galley copies. It's not June 4th. June 4th.
So it's coming. Well, there we go. Take the screenshot, folks. But they can pre-order, right? They can pre-order now.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't been promoting it because, you know, Palestine. But like, come toward the end of January, I should be doing like an official, like, here's the book cover, blah, blah, blah. But yeah,
perfect. Friends, this conversation will be in the timeline later. Watch it, share it with friends. Not because I'm here, but because Joél is full of wisdom, light, and love.
Come on.
And, having these conversations. Love you, brother.
Love you too, man.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.